next week or so. But if he has surgery on his back twice in a span of 8 weeks, which will be the case, what is the prognosis?
It's just difficult to say. It's a case-by-case situation, and no one can dictate that. J.J. Watt is a specimen. The guy's going to work harder than anyone else out there to rehab this injury. Whether it's something as simple as a series of epidural steroid injections, something that I perform on people who have disc bulges in their back, and that he does some rehabilitation, is able to come back at that 8-week period, or whether this is going to be a surgical repair where it's going to take him perhaps an entire off season to get healthy, that remains to be seen.
Dr. John Michels, our guest here in the Loop Sports Radio 610 of the Dallas Interventional Spine and Pain. Doc, so J.J. Watt came back about 7 weeks after his surgery, and then 3 weeks later he's re-injured himself. Is that just the grind of football did that to him? Is that he worked too hard? Is that he came back too soon? In your experience with injuries like this, what does that typically mean?
I think the back has a lot to do with those core muscles that he tore last year that he played through at the end of the last season. He had 5 abdominal core muscles. And something that we treat with our patients is when we're dealing with back injuries, after we've done maybe a series of epidural steroid injections or after they've had to go have surgery, we say you have to work on those core muscles and get them strong in order to protect your low back from further injury. And I wonder if he was able to get his core back to 100% after those abdominal surgeries that he had last year in order to protect his low back from injury. And as we know, J.J. Watt is a guy who's being targeted by every offense. He's double or triple teamed on every play. And when you've got a couple 300-pounders laying on your back, you're prone to injury, especially if your core is not 100%.
Do you think the fact that it's a repeat of the same injury, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because I've had a lot of injuries to my ankles, and they seem to just be repetitive. But the surgeries that I've had, I've never had any issues with them going forward.
I think, again, it's very difficult to say whether or not this is something that's going to have lasting effects for J.J. Watt. If it's something that's very easily correctable and we can get him back to 100%, this may be something that is going to be behind him and he'll have a long, illustrious career with the Houston Texans. However, if this isn't treated correctly, if this doesn't end up being a chronic issue, then we may not see J.J. Watt come back at the 100% that we've used to be seeing him play at. So it's really difficult at this stage of the game to be able to judge what kind of recovery J.J. Watt's going to make, especially since we don't know the full extent of the injury.
Dr. Michels, you have a unique perspective of being able to have been a player and now a doctor. Who is this blame on? Is it on J.J., the player, or is it on the team doctors?
There's no blame. This is the nature of the National Football League. As you know, this is a dangerous game, and players get hurt. It's high physical demand, and J.J. did have some injuries that he was recovering from, and he is a key, important member of that defense. I mean, he is arguably the best defensive player to have ever played in the National Football League. And so
that's
the
a stretch.
demand to get him back as soon as possible is always going to be there. And I played with a guy in Green Bay, Brett Favre, who knew that he could never miss a game because of injury. And Brett played through some pretty horrific types of injuries because he got his 300-game starting streak from Don Majkowski going down. He said, I will never allow injury to keep me from playing. And JJ's got that same mentality. He played through some things last year that, God forbid, anybody would play in the National Football League with, but he has that mentality of, I can never let my team down and I can never miss a play because that gives an opportunity to someone else to take my job.
Dr. John Michels here with us in the Loop on the T-Mobile Hotline, Sports Radio 610. Doc, not necessarily specific to JJ, but specific to football players who deal with these type of back injuries. Is there a chance, and if there is, what are the chances this could be a career-threatening, like never play football again injury?
If there's some level of instability in his spine, or if this disc is herniated to a point where it's really compromising the nerve roots in his back, where he starts to lose some function of his leg, that becomes a more serious issue. Typically, these things can be surgically repaired if necessary. Sometimes it's just conservative treatment. Like I said, I see these patients every day, and we can do a series of epidural steroid injections, do some physical therapy and rehabilitation, and they're able to get back to performing at high levels. We just don't know the extent of JJ's injury at this point, so it's really tough to speculate.
Right, and I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, knowing in advance that, obviously you haven't looked at him, we don't know the extent of his injury. Mine is going to be more of a generic, you played a compression on your back type position. Every snap, there's somebody pushing on you, and there's that compression on your back, and he does the same thing. What, in terms of, like I said, not knowing what specifically, what does that do to the back, just in general, and how would an injury affect that?
Well, there is a lot of compression, like you said, placed on the back of a lineman. We are hitting head-on with 300-pounders, play in and play out. And JJ is having to take extra stress on because, like we said, he's not just going against one 300-pounder, often two or three play in and play out. And then the other thing is those forceful hits that he takes when he's hitting a running back head-on, hitting a quarterback, those also put a lot of compressive force through the lumbar spine. So he's having a lot of stress that goes through that area of injury. So he has to make sure that, like we said, his core muscles are strong and that disc has enough stability so that there isn't a further rupture or further compromise of those nerves, because that's what we really worry about. It's the nerves that get pushed on by that disc, that if those get severely damaged, then you start to lose function of your lower extremities. You have long-term weakness. Those are the more serious injuries that we get concerned about.
He's Dr. John Michels, former Green Bay Packer. Now he's a doctor specializing in spine and pain, interventional spine in Dallas. Doc, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on today. Really appreciate it, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. John Michels on the T-Mobile hotline.